What's the funniest school project that got a teacher fired? Mine wasn't even the good one. Mr. Castellano taught engineering tech at our high school, and by the time I got to his class as a sophomore, he already had a reputation, not the fun kind. Every spring, right around the district innovation banquet, one of his students would have a genuinely good project, and every spring that student would somehow end up without it by the time June rolled around. Nobody could ever prove anything. That was the whole trick. He'd single out a kid's idea in class, get really excited about it, offer to help them refine it, ask to keep the prototype over a long weekend so he could test it properly, and then somewhere in there the idea would quietly stop being theirs. Sometimes the kid would just get discouraged and drop out of the fair. Sometimes their project would mysteriously fail to place. And then, a few months later, Castellano would announce some new invention he was working on for his side business, and it would look suspiciously, uncannily similar. My cousin Elias went through it 2 years before me. He built a solar-powered bike lock for the county fair, real prototype, real circuit board, the whole thing. Castellano loved it. Asked to borrow it for the display case in the front hallway, so incoming freshmen could see what kind of work goes on in this program. He never saw it again. He told him it got damaged in storage. 8 months later, he had a booth at a tech expo 2 towns over selling something called the Sunlock, and when Elias saw the photos his mom had sent him, he just sat on his bed and cried for like 20 minutes. He didn't even bother telling the school. What was he going to say? He stole my science fair project to the same administration that gave him Teacher of the Year 2 years running. He wasn't the only one either. There was a kid 2 grades above me, Brennan, who built a compost aerator for a 4-H project the year before I got to Castellano's class. Brennan wasn't even in engineering tech. He was in the agriculture program, but Castellano judged the cross-departmental fair that spring and somehow ended up consulting on Brennan's design. By fall, there was a compost aerator with a suspiciously similar gear ratio for sale at the farmer's market 3 towns over, under a company name that traced back, if you dug even a little, to an LLC registered to Castellano's wife. Brennan never said a word about it publicly. He just quietly switched electives the following year and stopped entering anything. I only found out about it because Elias told me, because apparently in certain circles, kids who'd been burned by him talked to each other in a loose, informal way, trading warnings like older siblings passing down which teachers to avoid. Hearing that story was actually the moment things shifted for me from that's messed up to somebody needs to actually do something. Not out of some grand sense of justice, if I'm honest. I was 15 and mostly just furious in the specific personal way you get furious when you watch someone get away with something over and over, and nobody with actual power seems to care. The adults who could have stopped it either didn't believe the kids, didn't want to deal with the paperwork of accusing a beloved teacher, or genuinely didn't know. I decided I wasn't going to end up as another quiet warning passed down to the next kid in line, so by the time it was my turn in his class, I'd already decided I wasn't going to be the next name on that list. I just didn't know yet what I was going to do about it. I spent the first half of the semester doing exactly what everyone else did, which was nothing memorable. I turned in decent work, kept my head down, let him think I was just another kid grinding through requirements. But at home, on my own time, with my dad's old tools in the garage, I was building something I actually cared about. A rain-sensing gutter alert. It sounds boring when I say it like that, but it wasn't. It used a moisture sensor wired to a little Bluetooth chip that pinged your phone the second your gutters started backing up, before you got the kind of water damage that costs thousands of dollars to fix. My dad's a contractor. He'd been complaining for years about customers who didn't know their gutters were clogged until there was a hole in their ceiling. I built it for him, honestly. Not for a grade. It just happened to also be a really good project. I knew 2 things for certain. 1, if Castellano ever laid eyes on it, it was gone. 2, I wanted him to lay eyes on something. I wanted him hungry. I wanted him to feel like he'd found the golden goose, so hungry that he wouldn't stop to think twice before he grabbed it. So I built a second thing. A stupid thing. A plastic spoon hot glued to the front of a desk fan, wired to a cheap motion sensor I got off a clearance shelf. I called it the Auto Feeder 3000. The pitch, delivered completely deadpan, was that it would fling cereal directly into your mouth while you slept, so you never had to waste precious morning minutes on breakfast. I brought it into class on a random Tuesday, set it on my desk, and waited for someone to ask what it was. When Castellano walked by and asked, I explained it with total sincerity, like I actually believed in it. He laughed so hard he had to lean on the door frame. He told the next period about it too. Word got around. Kids started calling me Cereal Boy in the hallway, and I let them. That was exactly what I wanted. I needed him to file me under harmless, under funny, under not a threat, under nothing worth stealing here. Then I started the second phase, which took actual patience. During his prep period, when the classroom was empty except for him grading papers at his desk and me pretending to organize the supply closet because I'd volunteered for cleanup duty that week, I accidentally left the gutter alert blueprint sitting on the workbench. Full schematics, parts list, everything, and clipped to the top of it a sticky note in my own handwriting that said, in big letters, "Do not show Mr. C. Embarrassing." I watched him from the closet through the gap in the door. He noticed it almost immediately. He always noticed things left out that weren't supposed to be. He picked it up and I saw his face change. Not the laughing so hard he has to lean on something face. A different one. Quiet. Calculating. He read it twice. Then set it back down exactly where it had been. Like he was being careful not to disturb a crime scene. And went back to his grading like nothing happened. I almost couldn't breathe. He'd taken the bait and he didn't even know I knew. For the next 3 weeks, I played dumb. I brought the auto feeder 3000 back for improvements. Made the spoon fling cereal even farther. Got the class laughing even harder. One day I even rigged it to shoot marshmallows instead, just to keep the bit fresh, and a kid named Sophia laughed so hard she nearly fell out of her chair, which only helped my case. Nobody in that room thought I was capable of anything more serious than flinging breakfast cereal across a folding table. Castellano started being weirdly nice to me during this stretch, in a way that felt calculated even though I doubt he realized how obvious it was. He'd stop by my table during work periods and ask how that other thing was coming along, the embarrassing one, always phrasing it careful and casual like he was doing me a favor by not bringing it up directly in front of the class. Once he even offered to let me borrow one of the department's better soldering irons for the gutter thing, whenever you're ready to actually take it seriously, which nearly made me laugh out loud right there, because he was offering me equipment to build the very thing he was already planning to steal the idea for. I told him it was just a hobby project, nothing serious, definitely not something I was planning to enter anywhere. Maybe something my dad and I would mess around with over the summer if we felt like it. I could see the relief on his face every time I said that. Like he was thinking, good, that means it's still available, nobody's watching this one yet. I never brought the real prototype to school. Not once, he never got his hands on it. But he didn't need the actual device. He had the blueprint, memorized or photographed. I'll never know which, and apparently that was enough for him to build his own. 3 weeks before the district innovation banquet, he stopped mentioning it at all. That was the part that told me he was close to moving. Thieves go quiet right before they cash out. The banquet itself was a big deal for our district. Parents dressed up. The superintendent came every year and gave a little speech about fostering the next generation of innovators. A reporter from the local paper always covered it for the Thursday edition, usually a puff piece with a photo of some kid's baking soda volcano next to a caption about the future of STEM. Teachers were allowed to present their own projects too, which was supposedly meant to model enthusiasm for the students. But everyone knew it was really just a chance for Castellano to show off whatever he'd been developing that year on the district's dime, using the district's workshop during the district's school hours. I mailed a copy of the blueprint, the actual one, dated and everything, to the newspaper 2 days before the banquet. Not the reporter directly, just the general tip line, with a short note that said something like, "You might want to come to this year's innovation banquet a few minutes early." I didn't explain further. I wanted it to land as a mystery, not an accusation. Accusations get people defensive. Mysteries get people curious. The night of the banquet, the gym was packed the way it always was. Folding chairs in long rows, a table of poster board projects along one wall, string lights someone's mom had convinced the PTA to buy strung along the rafters. My dad came straight from a job site still in his work boots. My mom brought her sister, who brought Elias, who hadn't set foot in that gym since his own sophomore year and looked like he was bracing for something the second we walked in. Castellano's presentation was scheduled near the end, right before the awards. He stood up in a blazer that looked new, clicked through his slides with the confidence of a man who'd done this exact kind of thing before and gotten away with it every time. He called his invention the Smart Feed Auto Dispenser. He pitched it dead serious. No trace of the man who'd laughed at my cereal spoon 3 weeks earlier, talking about solving the busy modern family's breakfast crisis and eliminating morning friction points like he was reading off a startup pitch deck he'd clearly practiced in a mirror. The superintendent was sitting in the front row nodding along, taking notes on a little pad. Then he wheeled out the demo unit for the live test. I want to be clear that I did not build his version. I don't know exactly what he cobbled together in whatever garage or classroom he used. And I don't know if he rushed it or if it was just fundamentally a bad idea dressed up in a good pitch. But the thing malfunctioned spectacularly. The spoon mechanism, whatever version of it he'd built, jammed on the wind-up, released all at once, and flung a full scoop of soggy cereal directly into the superintendent's lap. For 1 full second, the gym was completely silent. I mean silent. The kind where you can hear the hum of the gym's old fluorescent lights. The superintendent looked down at his slacks. Milk was actually dripping off the edge of his chair. Then from the back row, a voice yelled out, "That's literally a school project." It was Elias, my cousin. I hadn't planned that part, I swear, but he stood up holding a printed copy of the article that had run in that morning's paper. The one where the reporter, tipped off by my anonymous letter, had done some digging and found not just my gutter alert blueprint, but a whole pattern going back years, including his own Sunlock story from 2 years prior, complete with a quote from him about how he'd been too scared to say anything at the time. He held that article over his head like a torch and started walking down the center aisle, and by the time he got to the front, other parents were pulling out their phones to look up the article for themselves, and I could hear the murmur spreading backward through the rows like a wave. People turning to whisper to the person next to them, phones lighting up blue in the dark gym. Castellano stood frozen at the podium, cereal-flecked milk still dripping off the demo table, his mouth opening and closing without any sound coming out. The superintendent stood up, wiped at his pants with a napkin somebody handed him, and asked, in a voice that carried across the whole gym because the microphone was still live and pointed right at him, whether anyone could explain what Elias was talking about. That's when the reporter, who I hadn't even noticed sitting near the front, stood up and said she'd actually come specifically because of an anonymous tip, and that she had a signed and dated blueprint in her bag that matched the smart feed design detail for detail, dated 3 weeks before tonight with my name on it. She held it up too. 2 pieces of paper in the air at once, mine and Elias's, on opposite sides of the gym, both saying the same thing without either of us having planned it that way. Castellano tried to say something about coincidental design convergence, which is a real phrase he actually used, out loud, into a live microphone, and the gym audibly groaned. Someone near the back laughed, that ugly kind of laugh that happens when everyone's too uncomfortable to stay quiet. The superintendent asked him to step outside with him. Not angrily, not yet, just quiet and firm in the way adults get when they're trying to keep a public meltdown from becoming a bigger public meltdown. Castellano actually reached for his laptop and slides like he thought he was going to be allowed to finish his presentation after a short break. The superintendent told him to leave it. That detail got repeated a lot in the days after. People thought it was funny that he tried to grab his slides on the way out like he still had a shot at saving the pitch. They were gone maybe 15 minutes. When the superintendent came back in alone, he apologized to the room, said there'd been some irregularities that the district would be looking into, and that the banquet would continue as planned. Castellano did not come back in. I never saw him in that building again. Someone said later he cleaned out his classroom over the weekend, when nobody was around to watch him do it, which honestly tracks with everything else about the guy. The rest of the banquet felt like a formality after that. I don't even really remember what placed for the science awards that year, which is funny given how much time I'd spent thinking about placements and judges up until that point. What I remember is my dad, who does not cry, standing next to me with his arms crossed and his jaw doing this thing it does when he's trying not to smile too big in public, saying under his breath, "That's my kid," to nobody in particular, just to say it out loud once. Elias found me by the punch table afterward. He didn't say much. He just hugged me, the tight kind, the kind that goes on a beat too long, and when he pulled back his eyes were wet and he said, "You did that for me too, right?" Not really a question. I told him, yeah, I meant it. The article ran a follow-up 2 days later, longer this time, with quotes from 3 other former students who came forward once the first story broke, kids from years I didn't even know about, going back almost a decade. Apparently the pattern was worse than any of us knew. The district opened a formal review. Castellano's teaching license got flagged pending investigation, and last I heard he was working some sales job 2 states over, nowhere near a classroom, which felt like the correct amount of justice, honestly. More than I expected to actually see happen. My gutter alert never went to the fair. I never even submitted it. It's still sitting on a shelf in my dad's garage. Wired up, working fine, occasionally beeping when the weather gets bad. A reminder every time it goes off of the year, the joke project was the whole point. Best part, if you want to know the actual best part, the Autofeeder 3000 is still in my closet too. Spoon a little bent from all the demos. I get asked about it more than almost anything else I've ever built. More than the gutter alert even, because everyone at that school still remembers Cereal Boy, and now they remember why the joke mattered. He stole the joke. That was always going to be the part that got him. Sometimes I think about how easy it would have been to just let it go. The way Elias almost did, the way Brennan did completely. It would have been simpler, quieter. Nobody would have blamed me for staying quiet, the way nobody blamed them. But I keep coming back to that sticky note I wrote on purpose. The one that said embarrassing because it turned out to be the least embarrassing thing I ever built. Every so often a freshman I've never met stops me in the hallway to ask if I'm really the cereal kid. And I always say yes because I am, and because it's still the best thing I've ever built. Even better than the gutter alert sitting quietly on that shelf in the garage. Still working, still beeping every time it rains too hard.